Welcome to the Monsters Fresh podcast, where we explore the evolution and role of women in horror, as well as familiar tropes of the genre through a feminist lens. Hi, I'm Clelia, one of your podcast hosts.
Hi, I'm Meg, the other host of the podcast.
We are currently between seasons, and we're using this opportunity to record some bonus episodes with some guests we've been looking forward to speak with for a while. And today, we're joined by Emily and Ruth from the Nottingham Horror Collective.
Woo!
Hi!
Hey guys. Hiya.
So nice to have you on. Would you like to introduce yourselves to our listeners?
Sure. Thank you so much for having us on. I'm Emily. I'm one of the co-founders and the editorial director of the Nottingham Horror Collective. And
I'm Ruth. I've very nearly introduced myself far too early. Sorry about that, guys. I'm
very keen. We love it.
I'm the Nottingham Horror Collective designer. I do the pictures. That's what I usually say.
So Ruth is pictures, I'm words.
Absolutely fantastic pictures and words, might we add.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we create beautifully illustrated zines that are dedicated to exploring and dissecting the horror genre. It's each issue is sort of full to the brim of original artwork, writings, short stories, poems, that kind of thing, from horror-loving creatives from all over the world. It's not just Nottingham now. It started off as just Nottingham, but now it's...
we have
you're going to have to change the name soon, aren't you? It's going to be
I know, we were saying that, but then we were like, oh, but I kind of love that it's like Nottingham.
I feel like it would be a little bit pretentious to drop the Nottingham.
Yeah, it's going to be like the horror
the International Horror Collective.
I don't think we're
there. No, you got to stay true to your roots, definitely. Well, it's a pleasure to have you both on tonight. We're really excited to have you on. It's really lovely. And the film you picked for discussion is Barbarian from 2022 by writer-director Zach Creggers. So would you like to give the audience a synopsis and tell us why you chose that film?
Shall I
go ahead, Emily?
Okay, so the more I was thinking about it, the more I was like, I would say that Barbarian is about the fear of men. And I would say it's specifically three men. So there's one man who is the apparent nice guy. We all know him. You know, he still manages to violate every red flag that you can imagine when finding yourself alone with a man that you don't know. The second man is like an utter monster who is so ordinary that he operates his horrendous acts in plain sight. And then the third man is so devoid of any self-awareness that he doesn't even understand that he's a predator. So the story starts with Georgina Campbell, who plays Tess, arriving at her Detroit Airbnb for a job interview in the city. But upon her arrival, she finds that the house has been double booked. Suspiciously, a man named Keith is already in there, and there's been a mix-up with the booking, or has there? So could the titular Barbarian be Keith, who is played by Bill Skarsgård, who is famously recently played Pennywise? Or is there someone else in the house? But I think we were saying earlier, weren't we, Ruth, that it's best to go in blind. But of course, we're physically incapable of not talking about this film. So if you haven't seen it, I would say definitely switch us off and go and watch it and then come back through.
Oh, yeah, we always say spoilers abound. That's it. Like, if you've not seen it, you know, it's your own fault.
Exactly.
I mean, it's been out a couple of years now. So.
Yeah. You've had your chance.
There's a lot of opinions out there that would say that you don't really need to watch it at all.
Oh, yeah. There are a lot of people that don't like this film. And I'm getting a feeling that Meg is one of them.
Yeah, Meg, I've been seeing your face falling and being like, yeah, okay, what do I have to say about this film?
Oh no!
It'd be an interesting one to get into. Well, actually, I for one, I'm really glad you chose this because it forced me to rewatch it because I hadn't watched it since the first time I did, and I didn't particularly love it the first time I watched it, but actually revisiting it now, I saw a lot more in it that I didn't before. So, you know, I can see there's a lot more interesting things to discuss about it. So yeah, that was, you know, in that sense, yeah, good choice.
Yeah, we like immediately loved it, didn't we?
My first watch, I thought it was meant to be a horror comedy. Genuinely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, isn't Zach Creggers, he's from a comedy background, isn't he?
Yeah, and I mean, you're walking into a house and Pennywise is in there. Like, what else are you going to think that other than this is going to be a bit of a romp? And then it kind of, I don't even know what to describe it, but not a romp, I don't think.
I think like the reason why I love it so much is like there's no predictability in it. So there's nothing run of the mill about it. You never know what's going to happen next. And I love that because, you know, we're people that have watched so many horror films. And I usually kind of ruin them for us. By like sort of predicting what happens next.
This film's got perfect.
You know, when you like recognize tropes and you're like, oh yeah, I was like, Bill Skarsgård's a weirdo.
He gives up that vibe anyway, doesn't he?
Yeah, very odd vibe.
I know, poor guy.
It's giving Norman Bates, and he's definitely,
Yeah,
big time. Yeah. Even and that's funny because I think I didn't pick up on this the first time I watched it. You know, I didn't really pay attention to the structure of the film as much as I did the second time round, and you know, that psycho analogy is perfect because really it is constructed very much in the same way. So instantly I was like, oh yeah, okay, I start seeing a lot more of the influences coming out the second time. I almost felt bad that I was like, I can't believe like all this, you know, maybe I went into it because there was this is how marketing can ruin a film, you know, make it or destroy it. Either way, I think if you go into it with a lot of expectation, everybody was talking about that film when it came out, and you know, so I think I really bought into the hype, and I'm such a hypocrite because I do that. I watch a film and I will literally oversell it to people, and then when they're disappointed with it, I'm like, how fucking dare you? Like, this film is a masterpiece. So definitely did the same thing there, which I regret.
I think, to be fair, that's what happened with me. Is like I'd seen, you know, the trailer that they released in cinemas, which was so sparse, and I really liked that. Because, you know, quite often you see a trailer and it's like, well, I've seen film. Like, why am I paying to watch it? I know what's going to happen. And they didn't do that, but then there were all this hype around it. And so I think maybe when I first watched it, I were a bit, I was just underwhelmed by it. Right. But I agree, you know, about like the twists and stuff in it. It does something that I think is difficult, as you said, when there's so many films, there's so much horror cinema, and for a film to be able to surprise you and take you on that sort of journey where you don't really know what's going to happen next is really, you know, to its credit. But yeah, so I don't want to start it by saying, oh, I hated it and shit all over it, because I didn't hate it. But I just, I think I'm interested to have this conversation, because quite often if I think I don't like a film and then someone really likes it, and when they talk about it, I'm like, oh yeah, you know, it totally changes my perception of it. So I'm very interested to hear what everyone has to say about it. And I won't be a Debbie Downer. I won't be a little Debbie Downer in the corner. I will be at some point.
I'm really interested in talking how the film is, well, at least the first act, right, is an exploration of all those red flags that, you know, as female audience we would have recognized in watching the film. And, you know, that first, like, going into it, you're like, you know, it's like one after the other. Yeah. It's just so interesting. Yeah. And there was a lot of criticism actually about the Georgina Campbell character, which I think is really unfair, because it's like, how are you know, as a woman, I feel, you know, you can't win. It's like, no matter how you react to the situation, you're always in the wrong. So I wonder what you guys made up of that.
Well, I was listening to an interview with Zach Creggers, and I was like reading up on it, and he had basically, it was meant to be that first like part of the film. I think it was supposed to be like a short, or he wrote that script and then didn't really know where to go with it, which I think you can tell. Like it feels like the most
film.
Yeah, it feels like the most fleshed out
short film.
But he had like devised the script after reading this like self-help book. It's called like The Gift of Fear.
The Gift of Fear, yeah.
Survival Signals That Protect Us from Violence. And the author, Gavin De Becker, is a security specialist for governments and like public figures. I think he was like a security guy for like the O.J. Simpson trial or something. And it's about like sort of intuitively sensing danger, but perhaps not associating the behavior with that of like a typical attacker. So it basically just gives tips and red flags to look out for so that you can keep yourself safe and rationalize behaviors. And it's essentially to help folks learn to recognize these various warning signs and precursors. So I think it was going to be this short about this woman navigating all of these red flags and showcasing how we as women are really hypervigilant towards danger. But then I think he was like, but what if I kept going? And then there's a crazy naked lady. So I get like the contentions around it, I think. And I think we've spoken about this, Ruth, haven't we? That
there was all of that tension built where he's always like always asking her questions that are leading, like, oh, you know, basically asking her, are you afraid of me? Like, oh, I wouldn't drink that tea if I were you. I wouldn't trust me if I were you.
Yeah, it's like he's self-editing too much, and that's why I say it's kind of like Norman Bates, especially when he's like, he doesn't open the bottle of wine until she's in the room, so she can see that he's not like tampered with it. And he like says that to her. He's like, oh, and by the way, I totally understand that.
That's it.
And then she apologizes, and it's like, I recognize this behavior. You're like, you don't know what to make of this guy, and you don't want to piss him off. So you're trying to be the nicest, like you're trying to be nice and like civil about it and sort of tiptoeing around.
I think he's so unintentionally predatory in how he tries to be so nice, but then he comes off overbearing, and he ends up not respecting any of her boundaries. So, you know, by trying so hard to not be creepy, then he is like, and everybody's on edge. And as you said, you know, because he's Pennywise, you see him and instantly like he's definitely not.
He's been typecast as Pennywise, basically, or like apparently Zach Creggers told Bill to play him as normal and nice as he can be. And he was like, don't be sinister, don't be brooding or dark or ominous. Like the more nice you can be, the more uncomfortable we'll be. And he was so right.
I love that just the mere casting of someone can do that as well.
Yeah.
It was a smart choice, I think.
Absolutely. And I think that whole first bit where, you know, when she turns up, I think particularly for women is so recognisable is when you just shit out of luck. So like she turns up to this house in this rundown neighbourhood that she's not familiar with. So then she's like, do I go in here in this house with this man, or do I sleep in my car and somebody might attack me in my car? Do I keep driving? I can't keep driving. You know, like it's the way that it sort of builds, and you can see at every turn all the ways that if it did go wrong, all the ways she'd be blamed. So, well, why did you go in house when there were a man you didn't know? Why did you book an Airbnb in this part of town? Why didn't you plan better? Why, you know, you can see, and I think that is something that I don't want to say enjoy about it because that's the wrong word, but I was pleased to see this sort of recognition of this is the way that women have to exist in the world on a daily basis. And like you said, then he's been like really nice, but it's like too nice, and you just sort of think, well, but then how does he? I suppose if you look at it from like his side, like what does he do? So there is that tension because he's like, I don't want to be a creep because I'm not a creep, but now I know I sound like a creep because I'm saying I'm not one. And what would a creep say? You know, it's like this tension between two people, and it is really uncomfortable. Which again is to be able to do that and like really ratchet up that really uncomfortable like bum clenching tension is a skill. Not one I always enjoy because I am a bum clencher. So I will like,
and it's super uncomfortable. Yeah,
it's where like chivalry like starts to make us feel like they're going to ask for something in return, right? So like he's like saying, oh, you've got a pretty name, and then he's insisting on doing things for her. Like he gets her bags in, and then he helps her with the duvet, and I don't know, it just, I've been in a situation where it's like a man has been super duper lovely to me until I've rejected his further advance, and you're always kind of like, oh. It's like he can't really win, though. He can't win.
It is scary as a woman to be nice to a man. Just sometimes it is just easier to blanket, but you can't. If you literally
but you can't exactly, and it's actually something that's really hard to do. It's something that's really hard to do. So I think, when people have criticized her character and the way that she reacts to it, I'm like, but we've all been in that situation where actually, of course everything within you is screaming, just leave, just be cold, just be an arsehole, but actually it's ingrained in us to to be.
She does some really smart stuff. She looks at his wallet and takes a picture of his ID. Like she doesn't drink the tea that he's poured for her. There are these like murmurs of recognition of like if I was in that situation, what would I do? And I don't think I would have done anything different. Maybe, I don't know.
One of the things I do like about it, and I know this is sort of going to lead to a bit of jumping about, is the idea of the sort of, oh, she's off again about violent capitalism. I feel like it's all I say. But like the violence that we all endure under capitalism. So she's in a situation where she's obviously not got a lot of disposable income to go to a job interview, where she's trying to improve her life. So she's got to stay in this rundown area because she can't afford anywhere else. So then, so not only is she criticised for being a woman and behaving as she does, but it's also linked to like poverty and linked to like wealth and status, and the fact that, well, you should have stayed in an hotel and then you'd have been fine. Like, people don't get attacked in hotels. I mean, if you go on TikTok for more than 5 minutes, all you see are these videos about ways to put towels in locks so no one can get in. What I mean? It's this idea as well, and I think as we see its film progresses, the way that the erosion of that neighbourhood has allowed violence and crime to perpetuate itself, and that link to class and link to class violence. Oh, cheery. She's cheery tonight, isn't she?
It's very true. It's very true.
But I did really appreciate that about it. And I think setting it in Detroit were particularly interesting because obviously Detroit has had such horrendous like financial hits of it last decades. And so I think to set it there as a choice were an interesting one, and one that acknowledges, that this is rooted in reality, although the film is not reality in terms of the way it progresses, but there are those points about it are very realistic and I think very relatable to people watching it.
I'm just thinking, are we allowed to talk about Megan and Clelia's articles?
Yeah, I think we should,
because I think both of the articles that you both submitted have that as a real real center point.
About the discussion around class and justice around,
especially when it comes to obviously like destroying the planet, also the Crow being in Detroit. And both of your articles spurred me on to think so much more about that representation of like working class justice, especially working class justice being a whole other side of horror that we can talk about. I completely agree with that as well, especially because there's that part in Barbarian where we have a flashback to the old neighborhood in the like 60s, 70s time, and they're all complaining on the street saying, oh, this neighborhood's going downhill, it's going downhill, we've all got to move out. But then you're looking, it's pristine, it's beautiful, all these gorgeous cut lawns, and there's nothing wrong with that neighborhood. It's just this societal idea of like degradation from affluence, but then I suppose you see what things like mental illness and things like that does to a place like that, like this horrible cellar dwelling man creature. He stayed there, he stayed in that area. It almost really represents that working class aspect of it. It's sad. It's always a bleak story when you look at that. But obviously, I think that's one of the best things about Barbarian as a film. Definitely,
I would agree.
with that.
Yeah, I do. I think I think it's its strongest point is the way that it talks about that, and also about obviously that first part when we're looking at how this woman's having to navigate this situation. But yeah, I mean, that this guide never left, and sort of watched this neighbourhood just erode around him.
That's it. And of course, his house would have eroded sort of above him. He wouldn't have had the money to do it up or look after it. So he ends up going mad, ends up having these awful, horrible relations down in his dark, dingy basement. And yeah, it's so
But
true.
it's a convoluted argument that he's making, though, because I think, whilst I agree with everything you're saying, but, he's part of that rot, really, unfortunately, that is, is the way, that he's operating in that neighborhood, whilst it is still, nice and thing. And, the area is, what the people are complaining about is that, the crime rate in the area and stuff like this, which is very much part of. So, whilst he stays there and, definitely represents that, that working class staying there, I think the fact that he's portrayed in the subterranean tunnel, like a rot, that exists and,
Absolutely. You almost notice in that moment, his face goes sort of, you can almost see on his face, I'm glad, good, get away so that I can do what I want to do in peace.
Exactly.
Very scary.
It's such a realistic portrayal as well of, how people like that actually offend. They are neighbours and parents, and they do live in plain sight and quite often are committing the crimes in plain sight. And so although he ends up, and he does, I really agree with you, Clelia, about him symbolising that rot and that decay of society, really. I mean, he's a monstrous character who's doing really awful things, and they're facilitated by the fact that the area around him is allowed to break down to that extent, that he is on his own there, that he can just act without worrying that anyone's going to find him out. And so I mean, I think that is a really brilliant aspect of it. I'm debating when to get into my criticism of it. Should we just do it and get it out of the way?
Come on, get your soapbox out. Let's go.
Get it out. Come on, clamber aboard. I think when I were reading up on it, and they were like, one of the central themes of it is about trauma, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, but to me, it's very much trauma, women's trauma written by a man. This film, I feel that it's very much a man's interpretation of what it means to be a woman and experience these things. And I think that's totally symbolised in fact that the monster in this film is this person who, through no fault of their own, has been like systematically, abused and oppressed, and it is the figure that we're supposed to sort of fear. To me, when I were watching it, I were absolutely heartbroken for the mother as she's. I were absolutely devastated, because I thought, what a horrible existence this person has had. This, this life that she's been forced to lead. But we're supposed to see her as this, as the villain, really, as one of the villains, as the antagonist. And then the ending for her is so bleak and so awful. And I were really surprised by ending, because, and spoilers, so pause it if you've not watched it. But like the fact that, all right, we wanted Justin Long. Justin Long will make his career on the fact that everybody wants him to die in every film he's in because he's awful. He's really cornered that market. He's done a very good job.
Queen Justin.
He just plays that asshole so well. Yeah,
so we all want to see the man who treats women like shit. We all want to see him get murdered. We all want to see him get his get his comeuppance. But I thought then for her to die as well, it was so cruel. It was just like such a cruel, bleak end to this woman's life. And I think that's what I took away from it that I didn't like. I think
it links back to that idea of the monster not having any place in society, right? So you think at the end of the story, there is nowhere, there is nowhere for her to go, really. So I think that's kind of like the mercy killing at the end, serves, in that respect. But I think the film is trying to make the point that the monster is isn't her mother,
but the barbarian is Frank.
It's Frank, yeah.
I think the Barbarian is Frank. Like, to me, the mother is like the most sympathetic character in the film. Like, we have an essay in one of our issues, the fall issue. It's by a filmmaker called Ariel McLeish, and she talks about how she relates to the mother, and it's hilarious, but it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when Ruth and I first read it, we were like nearly in tears, because Ariel, as a mother herself, she draws these parallels that just breaks your heart, and it is a joy to read. So I would definitely recommend reading it. But yeah, when she boops his nose, and she's just like,
it's so, that's the thing. And I know you're right. I know you're right, Clelia. And we've talked about this before. And maybe my empathy for the monster is it's part of why, we do Monstrous Flesh, isn't it? Like, we don't want to turn away from it. But I think, I know and we've said this before, like, the monster has to die at the end. That's the way that the status quo is returned. And I'm very anti that. Let the monster live. Someone write a film where the monster lives. But yeah, I mean, you're right, I suppose, as well. And I do think there is compassion in how she is dispatched, I suppose. It's not like a really brutal, violent ending. It is a bit of a mercy. But it's just like, it bums me out.
Yeah, it's not fair.
It's not fair.
Yeah, and it's not fair, especially given that the barbarian of the film, Frank, gets to choose how he goes. And that's the real issue that I have with the film. It's like, this guy gets there is, but it's a reflection of how things are as well, right? Monsters are, and there's no justice, so it's it's true in that respect.
I feel like there could have been more of a sense of justice with it. Might have been an adding of an extra trope onto the film, but they should have done like a news report at the end to give some sort of justice to the mother.
To say like, there's been this, these years of decades of sexual trauma and abuse, and
just anything to show that it was acknowledged, because it kind of just fell flat at the end, and that was. I
did enjoy that she's the one.
Accept it.
I do enjoy that she's the one that gets the revenge on AJ.
Yeah,
like when AJ has to drink the breast milk.
Yes,
that's his. That's his rape scene.
That's his rape scene.
Yeah,
that is his rape scene. Yeah, I loved
he's
her.
Feeling that violation finally, but then even after that, you feel like he's going to have this redemption, and then
AJ, to me, like, he's so obnoxious. He's oblivious to his own behaviors. He doesn't self-edit the way that Keith does. He's like the opposite of when Tess is being hypervigilant to keep herself safe. He is not doing that. Like, when Tess goes down into the basement and finds the basement, she is literally like, nope. And I think a lot of us would.
She says nope.
Yeah, I think like that's literally how most of us would react. But then when AJ goes down, because obviously he's the owner of the Airbnb and he's trying to sell his Airbnb, right? He just gets the tape measure out and he starts
finds that snuff room. Finds the obvious snuff film
room.
Just
measuring it.
Just
he's
like,
going, you.
And he's like Googling, how much more money he can get. Can he count this into his
house? Is it a cellar? What about...
that is a great moment of comedy relief, I have to say that.
But he opens the door, looks down into the stairway, dark blackness, and just goes, like, you think he's finally hit him. This is a horror film.
He just goes,
and just start measuring it.
Yeah.
How many steps are him?
Yeah.
What's blood on the walls, crust everywhere. Like,
I read that. I read that Zach Creggers got Jordan Peele to watch a cut of the film early on in the production, and he got loads of notes from him, and I think that really comes through.
Yeah,
obviously I know he comes from a humor background as well, but I think there's it is very much in the same vein as Get Out, and I did really appreciate that.
Yeah, I remember watching it at the cinema and everyone in the audience thought it was so funny, that bit, because it was just like, what the fuck? Like, the difference from him going down into the basement to Tess is just so insanely different.
Yeah.
And isn't that just so typical, right? Doesn't that just show how different they are?
Absolutely, yeah. It does really highlight that she, my response was, no. My exact response was, no, absolutely not. I am not going into a a room. Like, I'm not going in. I don't like cellars anyway. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going in a tunnel underground. But yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But again, it does highlight I suppose the difference between how she sees it as a woman on her own in this house and how he sees it as the guy. I own this house. This is my, so there's a privilege there as well of this is my house and I'm gonna, and I think to see him in that, like oubliette when the mother's come in and he's just like screaming and you're like, shut up, fool! What you doing? Last thing you do if you scream, shut up. Like, it's just like, let me out.
Like his character, like he's not the man that's gonna like jump out of a dark alley with a knife, but like he's the persistent type, right? So that's kind of rapist he is. Like he doesn't take no for an answer. And if you try and make him feel the consequences of his actions, like you're the bitch. That's the kind of guy that AJ is. And I think it's really nice. Not nice isn't the right word. I think it's really interesting that we have all of these three very different types of men.
I feel like I've met all three of them.
I definitely haven't met Frank. He's more of I would say he's more of like a Jeffrey Dahmer type.
I feel like I've met one at least. Statistically.
You must have.
That we don't know about.
Absolutely.
AJ is this kind of like dude bro. He's like just completely oblivious to his own behavior and is like blindly hurting women, And when he goes into Frank's room, which I think is a really interesting scene, obviously the first time we meet Frank, he's in this like horrendous shrine of his own.
But at no point the viewer thinks that he's a victim, but Justin Long immediately thinks he's a victim. Which I think is so funny.
That is very interesting.
And I think it's interesting that the AJ, he wouldn't put himself in the same bracket as Frank. Because obviously, when he realizes what he is, he's like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
He feels sorry for him until that point. Where does that come from?
And but again, I think, that is something else I read about it as well, is that is the message that they're all cut from, they're cut from same cloth, and they are. And they're just on that continuum of male violence. So, AJ would see that he's not as bad as Frank because he's not kidnapping women and killing them. But the women who he hurts are still hurt, and he's still a predator. But
still
he's
the
just
same trauma.
It's the same, it's same trauma, and he's still the same sort of predator. But because he's not, it's that thing about violence, explicit violence. So it's men like that can sort of justify their actions because they go, well, I'm not being violent, even though they know that the implicit threat of violence. Women approach, somebody like that who's coming at you relentlessly, being just persistent, as there was always a persistent, but that underneath that is the potential that he could turn at any minute, and so he's thriving, and that is something that I think, you see, the more I talk about it, more I like this film. I knew this was going to happen.
There we go.
Yes, it happened.
That's our job.
That was our plan all along.
Me and Emily are very, very good at doing that, I think.
Yeah, but I think what's interesting is that it's that thing about how all men benefit from male violence because. And so AJ benefits from men like Frank existing because women all know that men like Frank exist. So the threat of violence is there. So he don't have to be violent because women are already primed to fear that he's going to be violent. So he's not even having to. So he's getting the result, but he's not even having to get his hands dirty, as you could say, because he's benefiting from people like Frank. And I think to see that sort of played out as well is interesting because it's seen as like two extremes. You could, but it's not. It's all the same. It's the same thing.
And the same way that you could argue that Keith also benefits from that system as well, because then it means that he can put the minimum just by presenting himself as a nice guy is enough, because there are predators out there and they are men who will be violent or men who will coerce you into other things. So therefore it's again it all plays in the same same realm, and it's really I guess in that I'm not sure if it was all that intentional in the writing, because I think it was more kind of like a stream of consciousness sort of writing this film, but the message is, it's still, I think, the things that you can come out that come out of it are, really interesting, even in that way.
Yeah,
so.
There's that thread in there. Yes, it goes off piece, I think, a lot of the times, but yeah. And I do agree with what a lot of people have said about the ending as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that it's so sad.
Yeah,
it's so
really
sad. And it's almost like, so AJ almost had his redemption arc, right? Almost.
And then he throws her off the tower.
And then he throws Tess under the bus. Wow. Off
you want
the water tower.
Yeah, what have you, baby? Yeah.
That's it. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's cold.
And then when he realizes she's still alive, he's like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
You slipped. I didn't push you." Like, what? I hate him so much.
But that's a great. I mean, I do find that part of the writing really interesting, actually, in his character, because you're right. Like, it is really representative of those kind of that kind of men, who will be like, oh, I don't mean to be like this, It's like, and when he's faced with the consequences of his actions, it's just he's like, oh, I just I was just it's not my fault. It's just it's all circumstantial. I don't I'm not really that person.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, that they thrive in that darkness. That like they thrive in the fact that there's no witness, and so in that moment we are the witness to that. That's what he did. Even though after, if he'd survived it, it'd have been like, oh, we had no choice, and he'd totally reframed this narrative that didn't include the fact that he threw a woman off a water tower to save his own pathetic skin. Like,
and Justin Long, he gets his eyes ripped out or taken out, like in the last films that he's in, right?
Yeah,
I mean, Jeepers Creepers. Yeah.
Or I suppose in Tusk, he has other things.
Oh God, Tusk. Let's not talk about Tusk.
Is it Justin?
You know what? We were going to do a screening of that, but then we didn't in the end. We were going to do
possibly one of my favourite films.
Ruth was really pushing for it.
I like Tusk. I did enjoy Tusk. I mean, I thought it were batshit.
Brilliant.
Yeah, but brilliant. Yeah.
I think it aged so well, and Justin Long, he just is the perfect asshole, the perfect one. Truly,
a little bit too convincing.
A little bit too convincing.
Yeah, almost.
It's like you're just playing yourself.
I think he's actually quite a big quite a nerd in very, very into pop culture and horror and things like that. So yeah.
It's interesting as well that as we see more and more stuff coming out about men in power and the way that you hope that like the chickens are coming home to roost a little bit. Like it's nice to see a film that I suppose tackles that. Although I do think that we've done what me and Clelia often do, which is like when we talk about 80s slashers and we're talking about this trauma cycle and everything else, and everyone's like, they didn't write that. That's you. That's you're projecting this.
You're reading that in it.
We're talking about when we talked about sleepaway camp, and we're like intergenerational trauma and all this stuff, and everyone's like, no, but they did not write that.
Maybe, I mean, to an extent, you never know. There's always that sort of element of maybe they might have heard a story from someone, or that kind of inspiration. I just really wanted to ask you all a question. How do we feel about the fact that the mum was played by a man?
Well, not very. I saw that when I was researching it, and it just sort of reinforced my.
I did not know that. You see, that is news to me. I had no idea.
Yes, I can't remember the actor's name now, but it's quite a convincing, very large, sort of booming character. So is able to turn into someone like that, but then he is depicting this woman, and I almost feel like it really fits into that film, because it really feels like it is just a quite exploitative overall, whilst also not even depicting being depicted by a woman.
I think it's a film that is very proud of itself, in what it thinks it's done in terms of, you know, its virtues.
Representation and
But then it does stuff like that. And I think even when I first saw, you know, the mother character and the way that she's so stereotypically... It's like, what's the worst sort of... You know, like the way that so she's sort of ageless, but you can tell she's supposed to be older, and she's but you know, the way that her body is presented, this way that it's a very like
it's hagsploitation.
It's just hagsploitation.
Yeah.
It's absolutely hagsploitation,
100%.
but obviously without even having the decency to use a hag. You know what I mean? In a way, at least in something like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane or something like that, it's giving women an opportunity to play a role. Whereas in this, you're sort of going, oh, look at this disgusting, horrible hag of a woman.
Exactly. Depicting her so hideous.
Yeah.
I think there was an interview with Zach Creggers, and he's like, I think it was with The Evolution of Horror, and he asked him about this. He was like, yeah, there's been some contention around sort of, you know, this problematic trope of this like older naked woman being portrayed as like monstrous or grotesque. And it also appears in Ty West's X as well, doesn't it? You know,
well, yes.
But and he says, what does he say? He says something. This is not verbatim, but he said she's a product of like decades of sexual predation. I think he said the physical manifestation of decades of sexual trauma, and we needed someone exactly like that to get revenge on AJ. That's what he said.
That's it, yeah.
Like not verbatim, but I think that's essentially what he said, which is
this is the problem I have with this storyline, I have to say, because you know, if you want to use that storyline of incest and, you know, and trauma, and also the master of math, by the way, because from the 1980s to 2023, you know, there's no way there would be that much
no
degeneration.
way. Scientifically, it's the biggest plot hole. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it just shows what the
exactly.
filmmakers
So, you know,
think.
to produce that you know, that human that lives in subterranean tunnel and yet has that superhuman strength. I know it's for the story, you know, it's fine, but it's kind of like you can't be both. You can't use this story to, you know, to portray that trauma and tell us, you know, oh, this is the, you know, the really deep message of the film, and then use something that is, you know, a technique that is so exploitative. So
I think that as a storyline as well is so
it's really B movie, isn't it?
It's such a tired trope.
I thought it was a B movie.
Yeah, well, I just think as a trope, the idea that some woman has been this, you know, poor unfortunate victim of incest and violence at the hands of a wicked father can be such a powerful message when it's done sensitively. But I don't think in this film it's done sensitively. I think it's done because it's a trope that satisfied his end for what he was trying to say.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think, again, even that's quite a self-serving response to be like, well, you know, this is why she looks like this, because she's so traumatized. And it's like, have some fucking sympathy then. She's not presented with any sympathy or empathy or compassion.
Exactly.
And you know, like she's, to me, she just feels like... So I saw the thing when it were going to be a short, and he'd written this short, and then he was like, oh no, let me just write a twist and see where it goes. And the fact that his mind went to subterranean monster dweller who's, you know, a victim of decades of incest.
Yeah.
And to me, it feels like it were a plot point designed to be shocking, as to build this short film into a feature, you know. And maybe I'm being harsh, but
if you asked a 14-year-old boy what the ugliest boobs are,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's what they did.
It's like laughable to a point, isn't it? It's laughable because it is. It's so stereotypically like, what's the worst body? We're going to have a naked woman, but we want her to be disgusting. We want her to be a figure of disgust. What's the worst body? Played by a man. What's the worst body we could create that we could show? You know, you can see the sort of reveling in that a little bit, in like designing this woman to be this, you know, freak, essentially, is what he's saying. This absolute genetic freak. So that were another thing I didn't
I'm sorry
like.
to announce we've done a 360, and now Meg is back to hating the film.
I've swung round. I've gone. Honestly, what a roller coaster.
Oh no! Oh my god, we literally just said the same thing at the thing. Such a roller coaster. I'm getting whiplash.
It's happened. I hate it again.
I completely agree with you, but I also still really love this film.
Yeah,
isn't that? Yeah, I don't know.
You know, that's all right.
No, I agree. I think it is bonkers, and it's really entertaining. You know, it is, watching it the second time, I was like, it is so bonkers, and you don't expect any of the twist, and on a surface level, I think it's a super entertaining film, and there are a lot of messages that are really interesting to look into in the film. Yeah. I think a lot of them are incidental, but either way, I think it makes for a really interesting conversation. So great pick still.
Thanks.
And I'm not the arbiter. So people can like it.
Yeah. We're not gatekeepers here. You can like what you like.
I feel like so many filmmakers, you hear them talk about their films and the real meaning behind them and things like that. I don't think a director or a writer or anyone really has their true meaning of their film. I think we have looked at Barbarian in a way that the filmmakers would have never seen us, because they are just so oblivious to the way that could be perceived, or it was all just really good marketing. Maybe
I will give him credit though. Apparently, there was a bit in that first part of the film where he was going to have Tess go and take a shower, but then he spoke to some of the women that were on set, and they were like, there is absolutely no way that she would have had a shower.
No way.
And he was like, okay, noted, and then he changed
that would be an interesting thing to do, and everyone is like, no.
Yeah, but also, I don't want to watch people taking showers. What a boring thing. Put something interesting in. Unless there's Freddy Krueger coming up out at drain or whatever. It's not a very interesting. Oh look, it's just somebody in shower. It's not very. But yeah. Well. Do we have any final thoughts on Barbarian before I take you into Folklore Corner, children?
Well, there was one thing that I wanted to... If you liked Barbarian, and you might think the way that I do, my favourite book of all time, and Ruth will tell you that I'll try and sort of crowbar it into any conversation.
Oh yeah.
It's House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielowski, and it's in the simplest of possible terms. It's about a house that's larger on the inside than it is on the outside. And there's this 6.5 minute hallway that sort of grows into this colossal labyrinth. It's an amazing book. But so as soon as I saw the basement and that sort of vast expanse of space between the house, I was like, yeah, this is my shit. This is what creeps me out, liminal spaces. So I think, I would just say, if you like that kind of stuff, you will enjoy that part of Barbarian. And I guess there's also some really cool video essays that I've watched. So there's one on YouTube by a guy called Ryan Hollinger, and then another one by the channel, cool channel DreadTube, and they talk about Barbarian in depth, and it's really interesting. So if you're interested, I would say, and also the Evolution of Horror podcast, the interview with Zach Greger, I would say definitely give that a listen as well.
Amazing.
I'm excited for Folklore Corner.
Yes.
Well,
we need some mandolin playing or banjo.
You should have brought your banjo.
Yeah. Well, this week I was thinking, what theme will it be this week? Because Monster Nightmare Woman doesn't really lend itself readily to. Well, it does, but
I'm surprised there with that.
Yeah, no. What I went for this week is folklore around creatures that live in your home. I thought that would be, an interesting area. So
I hope nobody was planning on sleeping after that. That's totally fine. Yeah, go for it.
So much like the mother, these beings may live out of sight, but emerge to play tricks or sometimes do even more sinister deeds. So We'll start in the UK, where we have a number of these creatures. One from Scottish folklore is the brownie. And these are described as ugly squat beings dressed in rags who come out at night and do tasks, which sounds like a pretty miserable existence to me. People think you're ugly and you dress like shit and you come out and do the jobs for them. But that's what they do.
Sounds like my life, man.
Yeah. me turning up to work. That's what I look like. But they're very easily offended, also like me, and will leave if they do not feel appreciated. Again, am I a brownie? I think what we're realising here is that...
You might be.
Are you outing yourself? Yeah. It's like, this isn't a therapy session, mate. Come on.
But so they'll leave if they don't feel appreciated, or they will turn malicious like another household creature, the boggart. So there's a rich history.
They've all got great names.
Brilliant, aren't they? When I was reading it, I was like, yeah, this is brilliant. So there's a rich history of boggart folklore, particularly in northern England. So there's two types, and there's one that lives in like marshes and fields, and the other one that lives in houses. And they're also known as bugbears, bugaboos, and boogeymen. This is where we get the term boogeymen or bogeymen from. So also ugly, horrible squat things. They are always malevolent, unlike the brownie, who can be nice, and they'll follow the family of the home wherever they flee, so you can never escape from a boggart. So they like to cause mischief, like turning milk sour, and will also make dogs go lame, which I thought was particularly cruel to the poor dogs. And they will climb. I know, little bastards. These little bastards. So what they do as well, which is particularly disgusting, is they climb into bed with people at night and put the clammy hands on their faces. Oh, repulsive.
That's so specific and weird.
Yeah, it's so specific and strange and invasive. Just clammy hands on your face.
I feel like whoever thought of that has like a weird clammy hand phobia.
Yeah.
Clammy hand phobia, yeah.
Or fetish.
And they're all, fetish, maybe they like it, yeah. Maybe there's a boggart. I don't want to know, people. Yeah. Anyone listening, if you've got a boggart fetish, we're not kink shaming, but if you have got a boggart fetish, please don't contact me about it. They will also pull the bedclothes off you and pull your ears. To keep a boggart away, you should hang a horseshoe over your door, and also leave a pile of salt outside your bedroom. So the big slugs, I think, basically.
I already do that anyway.
They sound like my toddler nephew who holds my brother's ears in his sleep and puts his clammy hands on his face. So I think my
just describing children, basically.
I think he's a boggart. I'll have to tell my brother to put some salt outside his door.
Yeah, and hang a horseshoe.
Aren't boggarts in Harry Potter?
Yes, I believe J.K. Rowling did rip off the boggart for her own games.
Sounds like something
and probably
she would do.
Somehow made it xenophobic.
Yeah, what a strange thing for such an upstanding moral character to have done. Please read the sarcasm, everyone, in my voice at that point. This is not a pro J.K. Rowling podcast.
No,
Nope.
Fuck J.K. Rowling.
Yeah. Sorry for bringing her up.
Yeah. So in Russian and Slavic folklore, we have and please forgive everyone my pronunciation, I do my best, but being from Barnsley, it has its challenges. We have the domovoi, and these are linked to ancestor worship, so they're seen as the personification of kinship, which I thought was very nice, and a way to honour one's ancestors. So they live near the oven or under the doorstep or the hearth and never leave the home, again, much like me. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of similarities to myself and these creatures. They protect family values and tradition and guard the residents of the home, especially children and animals. But if a domovoi is angered by wrongdoing or bad behaviour, they'll leave the home and leave its residents open to misfortune and illness. So to keep them happy, you need to give offerings of food and gifts, and maybe, if you've done something to make them particularly angry, leave them the blood of a sacrificed animal. So there's that. Protect your pets, everybody.
Yeah.
It's very complicated. I mean, I don't know how you know if it's unhappy. I don't know. Maybe I don't know how they alert you. It didn't.
Maybe they're quite vocal about it. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe it starts writing poetry and looking out the window wistfully. I don't know.
Pushing notes under your door. At night you wake it. Things like that.
A terrible roommate.
Yeah. So now we're moving to Mexico and the American Southwest, where there is the duende, again, apologies. And these are said to live in the walls of people's homes.
See, that
little gnome-like
creeps me
creatures.
out. I think
Yes.
things inside walls.
As a Lovecraft fan.
As a Lovecraft fan. Things in walls, don't fuck with those.
Yeah.
Read too many of the stories.
I remember reading a book by, what a terrible story this is. It was called like Kiss the Girls. I don't know if it was like a James Patterson novel or something. It was James Patterson. I've made that up. I never know anyone's name, but I think it was that one. And it was about this guy who used to like live in walls of people's homes for weeks, stalking them, and then like kidnapping the young teenage woman in the house or whatever. It was very sinister. I've never got over it. So
what was that film about I always remember it.
The Boy.
No, it's like where the police ring and they're like the call is coming from inside the house. What is that?
Oh, the babysitter.
The babysitter, yeah.
A stranger calls. Is it a stranger?
A stranger calls, yeah. And he's just like,
Ooh,
no, that's
I
hate that. I hate that so much.
Well, this little creature may live in the walls of your home, and it's said that they especially like to live in the bedroom walls of children's bedrooms, and will emerge at night. So they attempt to cut the toenails of unkempt children, but they're very clumsy and so often cut a toe off by mistake. And they will also steal from young children and have been known to barter with mothers to take children and eat them. And they're said to appear at night when children are playing with a ball, watch them, and later confront them. So when I was reading this, what I really loved is that obviously a load of mothers got to a point where they were like, you dirty pig, cut your toenails, stop bouncing that ball against the wall and go to bed. Oh, this monster's going to get you.
It's just cut a little toe off.
I was going to say, at first it sounded quite convenient.
Like, it cuts my child's toenails for me.
You don't have to do it. So, because it's taken over.
Don't have to cut their toenails if they don't have any toes.
Yeah, that's so, but also so specific for it to be a toenail. I thought that were just really funny. I could just imagine these like really, really just pissed off mums being like, "Look, cut your toenails." No, all right. Well, duende's going to get you, and you're like, "Oh shit, I best cut my toenails."
They should have done like instead of that, should have done like a tooth fairy, but for your toenails. Oh,
yes.
Wait, is that
put your trimmings under your pillow?
How much do you get?
I mean, it's creepy enough to put teeth under your pillow, so toenail clippings.
I mean, putting a tooth under your pillow is basically witchcraft. Like,
of course, we teach them young.
That's it. Well, that's the thing. Like, they say all these things are so demonic. We shouldn't be, exposing Satan to children. But then they tell them there's tooth fairies.
Like, there's a tiny little woman that comes in. It comes in. No, she doesn't steal them. She pays for them.
She pays you.
She pays you.
This is a transactional relationship. Like.
Yeah, and what's she doing with all these teeth? Why do you not think it's weird that this small woman wants to collect the bones of children?
A few years ago, I found my mum kept actually all the teeth in one box, and I found them a few years ago, and I was just like, "You're the witch." I was like, "Oh my god, it's just so fucking creepy to find a box with a lot of little teeth in it." It's like, I hope these are mine. So you got some explaining to do.
My mum did that.
Oh my god!
I think they're still in a pot somewhere. Absolutely
hideous. Teeth freak me out. Like when any of my nieces and nephews have had like wobbly teeth and they come near me and they wobble it and I get I can't. It freaks me out. I can't stand it. So like idea of finding a jar of human teeth. No. Oh, goodness me. Goodness me.
Drove me
Sorry,
Let's move on. So I've just got two left. In Japanese folklore is the Zashiki Warashi, who is a mischievous spirit loved by everyone, who takes a vague childlike shape with a red face. And these spirits are only seen by the residents of the homes they inhabit. And it's said that a house with one of these spirits is bound to be prosperous and fortunate, whereas a house without one will fall into decline and ruin. So these spirits are particularly fond of children and enjoy games and nursery rhymes. So to keep them happy, you should leave them sweets and toys, and also leave them comfy beds and food to eat. So again, I mean, I can totally get behind this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could get behind that.
But what happens if you don't leave them sweets and the comfy bed?
Well, then they will leave and you will fall into decline and ruin.
Oh, right.
Unfortunately.
So, fair trade.
That is so manipulative. First I was like, oh, I like this one, but now I'm like, I'm not sure. No.
I'm like, no, you're a narcissist. You're just a narcissist. I don't want you in here.
There's a fine line between folklore and
toxic environment to live in.
And finally, then we've got the niece, which comes from Scandinavian and Norwegian folklore. So what we might now consider a Christmas elf comes from the legend of the niece, and so they are hardworking and will do a lot for a little in return. So they often can be cheeky and mischievous and guard farms, tending to chores and taking care of animals, in return only for the trust and respect of the farmer and a bowl of porridge with butter on Christmas Eve. But if you don't do these things, then they will leave and the farm will not thrive, reducing the farmer to poverty. So what I thought were really interesting in all these examples from all these different like time points and cultures is they've all got this idea that if you don't keep your home spirit happy, then you're going to face misfortune. But if you do these very simple things to keep them happy, then you'll just prosper and you'll have a lovely life. And I just think it's one of the most interesting things when we talk about folklore is where that there's all these similarities in all these different cultures and all these like similar creatures.
Where did we all go wrong? We stopped doing those things and
Sorry, what were you going to say, Claire?
So we stopped doing those things years ago, and voila, this is where we all poor as fuck now.
Yeah.
We all have the same fundamental fears, don't we? That sort of manifest similarly. It's crazy. Like coming from a Polish family, all of the scary tales Babcia would tell you to not be naughty and things like that is so similar to Japanese things Japanese grandmas tell their grandchildren.
Yeah. And it's just so fascinating to me that you can see it across different time points as well and different cultures. And like you say, I mean, you're absolutely right, Ruth, it's like the shared fear, like shared fears of things and shared like things that we want to protect. So everybody wants to safeguard where they live and everybody wants that to be a safe sort of happy
especially
space.
Kids as well, isn't it? It's like they almost always come from a mum just being absolutely done, absolutely just.
Yeah,
I'm sick of this.
Cut your toenails.
I'm sick of this. Someone's going to come and cut your toes off.
Yeah,
Can't
you're
wait to be a
sickening.
mum.
You can barely get your shoes on. Cut your toenails.
You're the worst one that I heard.
God.
My friend said that her dad used to say that when you could hear the ice cream van, it meant he'd ran out of ice cream.
Oh yeah. I've heard so many people who grew up with that.
That's so smart. If my dad heard that, I'd be like, oh, should have thought of that
every day.
Yeah, that's so
very
cruel.
creative. No, I like it.
But well, I mean, have we got any? I know you gave us some brilliant recommendations earlier, Emily. But what about you, Clelia? Did you have any recommendations?
Yeah, I do. I've got a few film recommendations for people who, if you liked Barbarian, if you want to watch, things that are related to it or quite similar. I think my first one was Get Out by Jordan Peele, which I, really believe is what, served as a blueprint for this film. The People Under the Stairs by Wes Craven, 1991. Like Barbarian, the film is completely bonkers and goes into all sorts of direction that you cannot predict at the start. So for a good laugh, I'll recommend this one. Another film that I would recommend. I mean, I'm not sure if I should recommend it really because I watched it this morning and it's honestly I think I'm traumatized. But I heard the director of Barbarian mention it in an interview. It's called Angst by Gerald Karl from 1983, and it's a film that follows closely the. I don't want to call him the protagonist of the story, but the central character of the story, who's a serial killer. And I would say the interesting thing about this film and the director of Barbarian was inspired by this film for the segment about Frank in Barbarian, where the camera follows him closely. But this is kind of in direct contrast to loads of other films that I would say glamorize serial killers or gloss over the horror of their crimes. And that's kind of like a massive slap across the face. It's as immersive as it is nauseating. So I almost don't feel right recommending it. But honestly, like I said, I watched it this morning, so I feel like I need to inflict it on other people now. And
I don't think I've seen it. No, I'll seek that one out.
Yeah, seek it out, but I also don't blame me for it, okay? and the last one is The Night House by David Bruckner in 2020. Again, about a house that hides a lot of secrets. So yeah, those are my recommendations. But what about you, Meg?
Yeah, well, and obviously, like, Get Out. I'm glad you mentioned that. I love that. I think it's brilliant. What a revolutionary opinion to think that Get Out's brilliant. I had Perfect Skin from 2018, mostly because it's got Richard Brake in it, and Richard Brake, I just love her eyes forever. So unless I mean, I've not heard out awful about him, so I assume it's still alright to like him. And I love Richard Brake. So Perfect Skin, I don't know if anyone's seen it.
I haven't heard of it. I don't know.
No, it's really good. I'll not give too much away, but it's basically, he plays a tattoo artist who becomes, I don't know, can I even say what's about it without giving it away? I should have read the synopsis so I knew not to spoil it. But basically, it's this very twisted sort of dynamic between him and a woman, and it's all about, you know, the body and transformation and what does that look like, sort of, you know, where there's consent and not consent, and it's really, really good. I think it's definitely worth a watch. I had Fresh. Obviously, me and Clelia love Fresh.
Yeah.
And I think that's another really good example of, you know, male violence and what that looks like in a modern sort of context. And again, a house that's not what it seems. And then lastly, for a house sort of a bit more of a standard sort of the call is coming from inside the house, I had Black Christmas from 1974, which Clelia recommended to me, and I watched in the house by myself.
That's the worst thing that you could do. Yeah.
Honestly, I still see when I close my eyes that scene where there's that guy's eye through cracking. Honestly, it's the scariest thing. So and I was messaging Clelia, and I was like, I've got to go to the toilet. I need a wee so bad. But loft hatch is like above where bathroom door is. And I said, I daren't go to the toilet because I'm so petrified that there's somebody in loft. And she was like, I'm sorry, I'm not sorry.
I love that film.
It's so scary. Really scary, I think. Like, it's one of only sort of films from that time that I can remember, like, actually shitting me up really bad. To the point that I couldn't go to bed till my partner came home because I was too scared to go upstairs. So yes, they are my recommendations. Also, I think for things about, you know, another film that I think is incredible just generally, but also at looking at that idea about, you know, social decay and violence of capitalism is Candyman. Yes. Both Candymans do that.
Yeah.
And as Ruth mentioned earlier, I do have a piece on The Crow coming out in the forthcoming journal where I talk about sort of Detroit as a villain as well as all the people in the film. So I would recommend The Crow as well. Also, just because it's brilliant. If you're of my, I mean, I'm sure if people are of my age, they've already seen and fallen in love with Eric Draven. So I don't think it needs any introduction. But yes, they're my recommendations.
Solid recommendation.
I've got really, really good recommendation. It's a Justin Long film. Yeah. It's one of the scariest films I've ever seen. It's called Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Sounds horrible.
Watch it. That's my recommendation.
Terrifying. So terrifying.
But actually, for real, if people haven't seen Tusk, watch it.
You do need to watch it.
As I said earlier, it's just it's aged like fine wine.
Yeah. Oh, we've got an excellent recommendation list for this episode. This is very exciting. But I mean, have you got any final thoughts you want to add?
I don't think so. I think we've basically covered everything.
Yeah. Perfect time for my headphones to stop working as well. So,
God. I mean, we do have some stuff that we could plug if that's okay.
Absolutely, go for it. Yeah.
So, we've got our 8th issue of the Nottingham Horror Collective zine coming out this month. I think we're saying that the release date is the 13th of October, Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
And it has 2 articles in it from Meg and Clelia. So definitely.
Oh, plugging us, plugging us. Fantastic. We love it.
Meg's article is talking about the crow, as she said, and then Clelia's is on the feast,
So
which
good.
is, if you've not watched
brilliant.
it, definitely give that a watch.
Yeah.
That's a good film. Was it 2021 that it came out?
2021, yeah.
Brilliant. Welsh film. Brilliant. So good. And then what else have we got on? So we've got Mayhem Film Festival, which we'll be at, which falls on my birthday, which I'm very excited for. We've got a Halloween party at Liquid Light on the 28th of October. And then we're also doing a screening of Due on the Grudge on
the original 2002.
Yeah. On the 30th. It's Halloween Eve.
At 7:30.
Yeah, and again, we're going to be joined by Monstrous Flesh for a post-screening panel discussion on revenge horror, which is going to be so fun. And I
cannot wait.
Wait for that. It's going to be so much fun.
Great. Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
No, it's been fantastic. Such a pleasure. Thank you for coming. It's been brilliant to see Meg change her mind multiple times about the film.
So did I, man.
It's been a really, really interesting conversation. Really appreciate you coming. I'm really looking forward to the new magazine coming out, and we'll see you at all the wonderful events that you've got happening. So yeah, thank you so much, Emily and Ruth, again for joining us.
Thank you.
So thanks for listening to Monstrous Flesh. Please join us next time for more discussion about women in horror. You can find out more about us via our website, monstrousflesh.co.uk, where you can find out more about our research for each episode, buy our wonderful merch, and see our upcoming events. We'd love to hear from you as usual, so either via our email or social media channels. And also please rate and review wherever you listen to podcasts and help us spread our spooky word by telling your friends about Monstrous Flesh. And until next time, creepy weird, everyone.